if there are questions, you wear them. Otherwise, I speak English, so that doesn't. And there is simultaneous translation for the streaming. They will have it. Okay. Buongiorno, grazie per essere venuti alla conferenza stampa di A Compassionate Spy. Prima di cominciare con le domande vi presento gli ospiti al tavolo, il produttore Mark Mitten e il regista Stephen James. Thank you for being here. First as a simple question, the origin of the film, I think it was you, Mark, that found the book and that caught your attention.
It's actually a little bit different. There was a
term.
Yeah.
Actually, it was slightly different. There was a journalist that had worked with us on a previous film, Abacus, Small Enough to Jail, and he brought the story to me. He was friends with the family. And Steve and I were talking about new projects, and I mentioned it to him, and he sparked to it.
But this is a different Steve James documentary from the way we know you. And so what sparked your enthusiasm, and then how did you structure the film?
Right. So we made a decision after learning more about Ted and that there was this remarkable wife who survived him that we could talk to. So we went to Cambridge, UK, and spent 4 days there and interviewed her over the course of 3 of those days. And based on that, I knew pretty quickly that I wanted to do something. It wasn't clear what it would be, whether it would be a short but she was just so compelling and interesting and such a great storyteller. Wanted to do something. Then when we found out that there was quite a bit of footage of Ted before he passed away talking about it all, then it was like, okay, we can really make a feature documentary here. But in the course of her telling her stories, it dawned on me fairly quickly that how can we bring these to life? A lot of times, and I don't make many films with archival footage, but I've seen plenty of them, and a lot of times, you will find ways to sort of find images that support what's being spoken about, but it's not necessarily directly related to what's being spoken about. Sometimes you're lucky enough that it is. In this case, there would have been nothing to look at. There would have been no way to, even if we wanted to kind of fake it, if you will. And so I kind of arrived fairly early at this idea that even though I've not done it before in a documentary, that it would be great to do some recreations to really help tell these remarkable stories of when they were young and what Ted did and when they got together. And I thought it would also be really make it a more interesting film for a younger audience too, that they could become more engaged by seeing Joan, this 94-year-old, she's now 94-year-old woman, see her in a different way, see her as a young woman who was full of passion and her leftist politics and her commitment to Ted. And so that's what sort of led to the idea that we should do recreations, and it was a gas to do them. It was fun to do them.
And you use some of their voices in the recreation.
Yeah, so I also edited the film, and one of the things that I wanted to do, and it was always part of the idea when we were filming, was that we were never going to just cut away to a recreation scene, and it would just play like as in a narrative film. I always wanted to ground it in the voices of either Ted, speaking from the grave, as it were, or Joan from our interviews, to narrate those scenes as well, to kind of interplay between the narrative moments and the voiceover, for a couple of reasons. One is that because I wanted to give real credence to what we were dramatizing. I didn't want people to think we were taking all these liberties in the dramatization. I wanted you to believe them, even though you know that they're recreations. And I just loved the way she tells, and Ted too, but especially Joan, I love the way she tells the stories, and I wouldn't want to lose that aspect of it. And
I think the recreations are reenactments are so great because they give this sense of idealism and youth, to show them as young, that there is this sense of lively and participation to civic society and wanting to believe in good things. So it really grounds the film.
Yeah, they were two people that were kind of out of time. I mean, I think we have a tendency to think people from their generation were not nearly as aware or that their politics might not have been as far to the left as they were. I mean, I think we tend to think of older people as being conservative in some way, even though it's not true, right? And I think this was also a way of sort of seeing these kind of remarkable young people who had such passionate beliefs and acted on them.
Yeah, and it's pre-60s, so not everything happened with the 60s.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And one thing that surprised me is they shared the secret, but they made sure, he was taped and telling the story. But they wanted to create a record for it that was, and it's kind of a contradiction.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, that was one of the great discoveries when we spent those days with Joan, is she went and dug out this material that she had, and there were basically three interviews that she gave to us. One was Ted, when the book came out that really told his story in the late 90s, Bombshell, and the authors of which we interview in the film, there was a series done with BBC and CNN on the Cold War, and one of the episodes was devoted to spies. And Ted appeared in that, and they conducted literally a 3-hour interview with Ted, and they used about 30 seconds of it in their episode. And and part of the deal was when Ted consented to do that interview, was they said, we want a copy of the whole interview for our own purposes, to just have it, I think for posterity. And thank God they did, because I wouldn't have known that it existed otherwise. And it took some doing, but we were able to get access to that entire 3-hour interview, and of which we use about 15 minutes in our movie. And then the other two things they did were, there was an interview done by an activist of Ted on a couch that's a brief interview, but has some very compelling moments in it. And then the really unexpected and terrific one, I think, is the one where Joan participates with Ted, and that's the one that they recorded purely for posterity. I don't think they had ever any intention of sharing it except with their family, at the appropriate time. And that interview is very much featured in the film. And that's what really allowed us to bring Ted into the film fully, even though he's been dead for over 20 years.
But this desire to share with posterity makes like they were never, quote unquote, ashamed. There was never any regret. And that's kind of incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the film makes clear that Ted had certain misgivings that he came to feel as he became less naive about the Soviet Union, but he never doubted what he did, I think, ultimately, because, this is, I think, something that the film wants to make the case for, is that whatever you think of Ted's actions, he did them for the right reasons. He didn't do them for money. He wasn't a spy that got paid. He didn't do them, obviously, for fame, because he kept it hidden. He did them for the right reasons, and I think that Ted, if anything, and this is something that comes out in the film, Ted hated the fact that he had to lie for the rest of his life about what he had done, because he felt like he had done it for the right reasons, and he was tempted at different times to come clean, and Joan prevented him from doing that, which was in his best interest, because he probably would have been executed.
It's interesting, this part where she's actually doesn't want him to come out. She could protect it, and a lot of the beauty of the film, it's also in their life story. I mean,
Yes.
It's just like really soulmates in any way.
It was one of the things that we immediately made us want to do the film. I mean, Ted's story, the geopolitical part of it, what he did is extraordinary. But what made me want to make this film as much as anything was to not just do a story that detailed his actions, but that really delved into this love affair between him and Joan, because it's so moving and poignant, and you know, she says at one point early in the film that before she met Ted, she was determined. She met him in college, and she was determined to have 10 years where she would not get married, because she was clearly a woman who wanted to enjoy her freedom. And she, you know, she speaks, you know, she speaks rather, it's funny and charmingly about how all these men were coming back from the war. And so she was determined to spend 10 years of freedom, and then she met Ted, and she realized that that was not going to happen. And so she married him quite young, and they remained together until his death.
And he told her before asking her to marry.
Yes.
So he came clean right away.
Yes.
And he was 18. As we were talking before in the other room, you introduced in the documentary a film, Mission to Moscow. I don't know how many people know it. I don't know how many people know it, but how did you discover it? And give us a context of the film.
Yeah, so in editing, I started to really dig into what was out there in terms of archival material. And, you know, I knew that there had been a lot of films made, Frank Capra in particular. I knew about Frank Capra's films made during World War II in support of the war effort. And Frank Capra also made a really interesting film that I almost put in the film about life in the Soviet Union, which was, you know, and it was very admiring, and it's like, you know, they were resisting the Nazis, and it's actually quite a good film, and I probably would have used that until I found Mission to Moscow from Michael Curtiz. And this is just an extraordinary document, a film made during the war. You know, the ambassador to the Soviet Union, Davies, was sent by Roosevelt, the president, to with the sort of explicit purpose to try and come back and with a way to sell the Soviet Union as allies to the American people. And so this film, Mission to Moscow, was made during the war, which is kind of extraordinary. And it is beautiful filmmaking, but when you look at it both in our film, or if you were to treat yourself to watching the whole film, it's just an extraordinarily revealing document about a propaganda effort, in many ways a sincere one, but a propaganda effort nonetheless, to try and convince the American people that the Soviet Union were treasured allies. And one of the things Americans don't know, and Joan makes this case in the film, one of the things Americans don't know, I think you here know this clearly, but you know, American education, there's a tendency to present that the U.S. won World War II, you know, that we came in, and that's why the Allies prevailed, was simply because the United States entered the war and we took it from there. And there is very little sense of the true history of the Soviet Union's role in the victory in World War II and the loss, the tremendous loss. And so these were all things that Joan and Ted knew and cared about, because they actually they also came from Russian heritage, both of them. So anyway, I'm rambling.
No, but it's a good ramble. And there was someone that wanted to ask something there.
Hi, good morning. Marc Garriga from Catalonia radio station. I would like to ask Steve James, I wonder if the way Donald Trump and his administration work was one of the reasons that pushed you to make this documentary, and if you think that the people know these stories maybe a warning for the future. Thank you.
Yeah, It's a great question. I think I would have done this regardless. I just want to make sure I understood. You were saying the Trump administration? Yes. I think I would have wanted to do this film whether Trump had been in power or not, because even though he represents a particularly egregious example of complete lack of sense of history, America, this is something that we as Americans possess much more widely. It doesn't start with Donald Trump. And so I just felt like this is an extraordinary story to tell, and an extraordinary relevant story to tell now. And it only became more relevant, it's only becoming more relevant when you look at, not only the war in Ukraine, but also when you look at that China is now in a much more concerted effort to build up nuclear arms. The whole debate about nuclear arms has kind of been pushed to the back burner in recent years because of climate change and all kinds of other problems, but it has not gone away, and if anything, it's probably ramping back up and will become even more significant, and so I hope that this is a film that speaks to that.
It also, I think, in terms of it speaking to the present, I think it speaks to a need to engage a little bit more with our political system, and I think that it's very inspiring that way.
Yeah, Ted, not to give away the ending, but maybe you've seen it. But at the end of the film, Ted makes this sort of plea to future generations to not let governments dictate history, essentially, and that people need to rise up and seize control. And I hope that when people get to that moment in the film, that they're not just thinking about nuclear arms, they're thinking about a lot of things, climate change, a lot, political engagement, disenfranchisement, any number of issues that beset us.
Mark, do you want to add?
No, I was going to say, I think that the whole aspect of Ted being 19 years old and being so young and making such a decision that had ramifications that led throughout his life, I think that stimulus is still equally important for youth to take control of the situation and be more active.
And was there ever, because the story is so incredible, was there ever a thought about making the film broader and bringing in people to talk about, and commenting and so forth, or you just knew that you wanted to keep it this pure?
No, that's a great question. We talked a little bit about that, but I felt pretty firmly that that I just wanted to tell the story, and that if we do our job right, that will be in your mind as you watch a film like this, or certainly, hopefully, by the time you get to the end of this film. There was a certain kind of purity to the telling of the story that I didn't want to try to turn it into a diatribe or a broader historical lesson about all kinds of issues. I felt like embedded in this story and in Ted and Joan's activism and beliefs is some really valuable lessons for all of us that go beyond the story.
How known is their story?
Not known at all. I mean, I have yet to encounter anyone when they ask me what film, what I've been working on, that knows who Ted Hall is at all. I had no idea who Ted Hall was. He's got a Wikipedia entry, which is not bad, but there's, and this book was written 20 years ago or so, Bombshell, which told the story, but it wasn't widely read. So it's not a known story at all. I mean, people know about a lot of people don't even know about the Rosenbergs in America, but people who do pay attention to history and some of this time will know the Rosenbergs. They'll certainly know the name because it made such an impression. An impact in the public, sphere when it happened. But as the film makes clear, Ted, what the Rosenbergs did was extremely minimal compared to what Ted did, and Ted, wanted to go and confess at one point to try and spare the Rosenbergs, which of course Joan said no.
But it's still striking. I mean, you explain it in the film, but it's still kind of striking that he wasn't get caught. You know, or it was get caught, but in some way it was never.
Yeah, the problem was that, is they intercepted these Venona cables, which were the secret cables in the Soviet Union during the war, spy cables, and they figured out the code, which was at one time considered unbreakable, and once they figured it out, that's how they gleaned that Ted had done something, and they zeroed in on Ted. But the problem is that they needed him. The cables, as the film makes clear, could not be used in court. So they needed Ted to confess, or they needed to discover incriminating evidence beyond that. And so they, as you see in the film, they bring him in for questioning and badgering, and they try to get him to break, but he doesn't. And then they followed him around and tried to get evidence again. But he was always such a cool customer when it came to this. At the time he was being questioned by the FBI, he was probably 25, maybe.
18, he gives away the bomb at 25.
25, he rebuffs the FBI, And so he managed to, there were other spies that they did the similar tactic to, Carl Fuchs, for example, and Fuchs eventually broke and confessed, and that's how he got arrested. But Ted didn't, and Ted was extremely careful. I mean, they didn't even talk in their automobile about any of this. They didn't talk about it at home. They were always concerned that there might be someone bugging them, even before it became clear that that was absolutely going on.
Did you reach out to anyone in Russia? And
We did interview a Russian journalist who was good, but I kept trying to figure out a way to work him into the film, but it just didn't work out. And part of it was I wanted as few voices in this film as possible. I mean, if it had been possible to just tell it and do justice to it with Joan and Ted, I would have done it. But it became clear that to really give people the proper context, we needed to hear from other people. And I'm glad we made that decision, but I had a pretty high bar about what gets you into the film or not. And even though the interview was quite good, and he brought a kind of Russian perspective to what Ted did.
And what was the Russian?
Well, just, I think there was a feeling that, he was a journalist, and he was actually former KGB, but not too young to have been around at that time. I think the sense is that Ted was extremely valuable in the information he provided. He was not the only one, which is true, but that he was extremely valuable. And so the interview didn't yield a lot of tremendously different insight than we already kind of had, and that's why I didn't end up using him.
I think she has a question.
Hi. Hello, Tatiana Rosenstein. Thank you for this film, very well researched and very nice. I wonder about this word spy, which is on the title. Even you try to soften it somehow.
Yeah.
But so what do you think if Ted thought about himself as spy, and what is your opinion on all of that?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question, because we kind of went round and round with Joan about the title. That was quite an adventure. And she did not originally want spy in the title. And we tried all kinds of titles where we didn't have spy. I'm not going to bore you with the list, but so I think Ted, to answer your question, Ted nor Joan really thought of Ted as a spy, but he was. He meets the definition of spy clearly. At one point I sent them the Merriam-Webster definition of spy in my talks with them to kind of say, I understand you don't want to see him that way, but he was a spy. I think the problem with the word spy is the connotation it has in culture, from movies and television and novels going forever and ever, which is that a spy, someone who is a spy is considered bad, and it's a deceitful act that has, no merit. And that wasn't the case here. So in some ways, I think we're trying to rescue the word spy, but with our title and with the film, from this sort of misapprehension that if someone is a spy, it's automatically they have done something wrong.
And it's it's a profession, actually.
Huh?
It's a profession.
And it's a profession.
Profession.
Exactly. It's one you can get paid to do. And Ted didn't even get paid.
I think it's past 12:30, so we're out of time. But I want to thank you, Steve and Mark, for being here, for being generous with your words, and for bringing the film. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Buongiorno, benvenuti alla conferenza stampa del nostro film in concorso Un couple. E sono presenti con me al tavolo la coautrice e interprete Nathalie Boutefeu e il coautore e regista Fred Wiseman. So I'm going to start. You two had worked together in another monologue. It was an Emily Dickinson. How did you start that one project, and what led you to that?
Well, we had met and we became friends, and I knew of. I had seen. The Emily Dickinson play had been very popular in America. An American actress by the name of Julie Harris had performed it for many years. And I was looking for a project to do with Natalie, and I thought it would work out all right. And from my point of view, it did.
Natalie, no?
No.
What do you like? You know, La Dernière Lettre was another monologue that you put on stage a play, and then you made a film. What do you like about the form of monologue?
Well, what I like about the form of monologue is it's the opposite of what I do in the documentaries. In the documentaries, I try to create a world, and through the activities and the words of hundreds of people, and the monologue, the effort is to create a world with one person. So it's the same kind of effort, but in a different form. And I also like, I've done very little of it, but I like working in the theater. And I liked working with Natalie.
And I'm waiting for her translation. Is it good? Okay. How did you settle? I think that when we talked, you first spoke to me about this film. You said that you were both reading Tolstoy at the same time, and you started talking about the diaries and the letters and the Tolstoys in general. Is that correct, Natalie? Oui.
Ok.
Oui.
J'ai pas bien compris ce que vous m'avez dit. Oui, on a lu environ 3000 pages et on a fait une sélection chacun, et puis après on s'est retrouvés pour... Fred a choisi finalement les passages qui nous plaisaient le plus.
Well, we chose them together, really. We each made a selection, and we discussed what we had selected, and then we winnowed it down, because we had selected originally a lot more material than obviously we used, and we winnowed it down, and then some of we changed. Then Natalie added some things, and Natalie made the French more contemporary than the translation had been.
You made it. You brought it to the present, which is a really interesting. It's a beautiful choice. Yeah. It makes it feel very urgent.
Well, it makes it feel. I hope it makes it feel contemporary.
Well, it is contemporary in many ways, but yes, the present makes it feel contemporary. Yeah. And
Oui, c'était très 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 important que ce soit pas un film avec des gens qui racontent le passé, mais que ce soit c'est des questions éternelles qu'on affronte aujourd'hui et qu'on a affronté hier et qu'on affrontera demain. Et on voulait parler de ça. Et ce film est aussi quand même le fruit de milliers d'heures de conversation avec Fred. Pas seulement sur le choix des textes, mais autour des textes, autour de la vie, la création, le couple, la liberté. Qu'est-ce que c'est vivre à deux quand on veut créer chacun? Voilà, c'est des questions qu'on a eues très vite des discussions, des conversations qu'on a eues très vite tous les deux. Oui? Tu es d'accord?
I agree completely, naturally.
And why do you think the Tolstoys and Sophia in particular incarnated all the themes that you just mentioned and that you wanted to address?
Ce couple cristallisait toutes les questions qu'on se pose sur l'amour et la création. Et il était l'exemple concret de toutes ces choses qu'on a évoquées ensemble. Et je crois que personne ne connaît Sofia Tolstoï. Elle a eu un rôle très 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 important, toujours caché, toujours tue, et on ne connaît que lui. Mais elle a été fondamentale dans sa création, dans son inspiration à lui. On voulait parler de ça.
Fred?
You know, she worked very closely with him. She copied his manuscripts.
One of the surprises of the film, I didn't know what it was. You sent it, and it was this outdoor, this garden, this incredible place, you know, where nature, you film nature with like the sublime, romantic sublime, you know, terrifying and dangerous and yet beautiful. When did you know that you wanted to do it outdoors and in that setting?
Well, I knew almost from the beginning that I wanted to do it outdoors, and I had originally thought of a couple of other places to do it. But then I remembered it's called the Jardin La Boulée, and it belongs to Veronique La Boulée, and it's on Belle-Île. And she's devoted her life really to the cultivation of the garden. And once I thought of the garden, I called up Veronique and asked her whether we could shoot there. And the garden really became another character in the film. Because on the one hand, the garden is very beautiful. On the other hand, under the surface, the Darwinian struggle for existence is always present.
I think there's a question there.
Buongiorno, sono giornalista russa dell'agenzia stampa russa TASS.
Good morning.
E appunto volevo chiedere la scelta del posto, che è sì, romanticismo, bellezza, ma per noi è molto lontano dal, insomma, non assomiglia tanto alla Russia dove hanno vissuto, insomma, il posto che ora è diventato il museo. Perché questa scelta, insomma, o non era così importante l'ambiente, insomma, non doveva corrispondere all'ambiente dove hanno vissuto? Grazie.
Well, in my view, it was not necessary for it to correspond to the place they lived. The movie is a fiction, and many of the choices in the film, in fact, all the choices in the film, are expressions in one way or another of artistic license. I mean, we used aspects of the Tolstoy life. But I didn't feel, neither of us felt an obligation to make it literally the Tolstoy's life and to shoot it in Russian. Somebody asked me recently why the movie wasn't shot in Russian. And the movie wasn't shot in Russian because we prepared it in French.
C'è una domanda qua.
Sì, grazie. Elena Filini, Gazzettino. Una domanda per Nathalie. Ha detto appunto che la figura di Sofia è relativamente sconosciuta, però per i tolstoiani Sofia non è sempre stata una figura positiva nella vita del marito. Dopo aver lavorato così tanto su questo ruolo, che idea si è fatta di questa donna?
c'est une question délicate. Je crois qu'elle avait un caractère aussi difficile que son mari. Elle est ambivalente, elle est très très passionnément éprise de cet homme, et en même temps, au fur et à mesure des années, elle est déçue. Elle lui en veut, enfin, elle est caractérielle aussi. Comme lui. C'est pas une sainte avec un démon, c'est deux démons qui vivent ensemble. Et on avait envie aussi d'explorer tous ces aspects-là, noirs et clairs.
Una domanda dopo lei.
Hello, thank you so much, Mr. Weisman. First of all, because you show why Sofia Alexandrovna is a very big figure. Because now in Russia, lots of researchers trying to open her legacy and her contribution into literature of Tolstoy and how he helped him. But I just have a very practical question. Is it possible to show this film now in Russia?
Well, yes. I had an invitation to show the film at a festival in St. Petersburg, but I declined to send it because of the war in Ukraine. I didn't think there should be, I didn't want to have my work shown in Russia at the moment. And I was torn about that because on the one hand, it was clear that the people who ran the festival, they wrote me an extremely nice letter, and it was clear that they didn't share the general, the government's view about the war in Ukraine. So on the one hand, I would like to have had the film shown. On the other hand, I thought that it was not the right thing to do, and so I didn't send it.
Buongiorno, Paolo Martini dell'agenzia di stampa di Cronos. Volevo chiedere al maestro Weisman, ma lei ha deciso innanzitutto di stabilirsi vivere in Francia, e la seconda domanda è che cosa apprezza dell'opera letteraria di Tolstoi?
Well, I decided to live in France because the food's good. Like a lot of other people, I read Tolstoy when I was in college, and then I reread a lot of Tolstoy recently, and I don't think I properly appreciated it. I'm not suggesting I'm mature now, but I was more mature recently when I read Tolstoy, and I understood better what at least I thought I understood more about what he was trying to do, and why he's universally considered to be a great writer. I also thought that Tolstoy, there was a contrast between Tolstoy's great understanding of characters, in particular women. The women in Anna Karenina and War and Peace are beautifully rendered or written about. And it was interesting to me that comprehension, that understanding of human behavior that he displayed so magnificently in the novels was not transferred to his daily life.
Bonjour, Mize Hayashi, journaliste japonaise pour le journal japonais. Et nous connaissons très bien que M. Weisman, vous êtes de très grands maîtres de documentaire. Est-ce que pour vous, quel a été le plus grand défi maintenant de faire une fiction maintenant? Merci.
each film is a challenge, and I'm always nervous before I start each film, as I was nervous when I started this. But I mean, it's always, I like doing something new. There's an American writer, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who one of his thoughts, which has become a cliche, it's been quoted so often, but it's appropriate to the situation. He said that consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. And I didn't think I was in any way obliged. I mean, there are people who think I should only make documentaries about institutions, but I think I should make movies in any form that interests me, and I try to learn and make them as best I can.
This is a very different. It's a different process from from your documentary. Normally, going to a place, you spend several weeks, and there you go home with a lot of footage, and you edit. How did you two work? For example, did you stage the? It's never the same set. You move around. How was it during the filming?
Well, I mean, it's the exact opposite of doing a documentary, because the script was written in advance. Natalie, we performed each sequence. There were 5 or 6 takes of each sequence, and Natalie performed it in different ways. We discussed the different ways it should be performed, and so. In a sense, what goes on in the editing of a documentary went on in the production of the film and in the shooting of the film, because we had to be very conscious, tried to be very conscious of what we were doing and the implications of the text and how it should be performed. And in a documentary, you don't have that consciousness is applied during the editing.
Yeah. Natalie, how was for you the shooting? Was it liberating that you were always were moving? What is it difficult?
On n'a pas répété. On a passé quelques jours à Belle-Île ensemble pour voir les lieux qui inspiraient Fred. Et le temps de tournage a été assez court, extrêmement dense. Très intense, et c'était le mélange d'improviser les choses et en même temps de mémoriser ce texte et de l'habiter complètement. C'était un travail très fort pour moi à faire et très, guidé par le regard de Fred. Et voilà. Mais on n'a pas répété. On s'est lancé. C'est vrai? On s'est jeté à l'eau et l'eau était très très froide.
Absolutely.
It's interesting.
Yeah, but we landed.
When I saw the film, its contemporary dimension, it's not just because it's about a man and a woman, that didn't get along and then sometime got along and then they didn't get along, but it's also the way Sofia wants to be part of the creative process. She demands a role that it's not a traditional role, and that felt extremely to the present. She wants to be a creator as well. Yeah.
Oh oui. Elle veut tout partager, elle veut créer avec lui, elle veut être regardée par lui, elle veut que, comme Fred disait, cette compréhension extraordinaire qu'il a à travers son écriture et son art, elle veut que ce soit le même homme dans la vie. Mais c'est un homme absent. C'est un créateur fantastique et c'est un homme absent. Et c'est à ça qu'elle se... c'est avec ça qu'elle est obligée de lutter. Elle veut exister au même titre que lui, mais elle n'y arrive pas.
And she wrote 2 novels, and the theme of both novels, and they're well written, the theme of both novels is the main character wants a companion, a husband or lover, with whom she can talk, with whom she can share experience, who's interested in the education of her children. The main character wants in the novels all the things that she feels she didn't get in her marriage.
And yet, and this is what makes the movie even more moving, and yet she loves him. So I think that the movie is capable of accepting the contradiction and the complexities of love, and how you can be in a relationship that is not placid or harmonic, but you can still be in love and you still want to be in that relationship.
Elle est amoureuse toute sa vie de cet homme. Elle est complètement passionnée par lui. Elle ne peut pas se passer de lui. Elle souffre avec lui, mais elle l'aime. C'est sa croix.
And from the letters, because you use also diaries and letters that he wrote, did you get the feeling that he was also in love? Or, I mean, it was a two-way.
From time to time. It wasn't as consistent
as hers.
I mean, I think he expressed his passion and then he disappeared.
Is it true that?
Oui, oui.
Is it true that at some point you wanted to add a man at the end of the film, have a Tolstoy letter at Lyon?
Yeah, it's true, but
Une voix.
It was a voice. It was going to be a voice over the end credits, but I decided it wasn't necessary. It was going to be a voice, the man, Tolstoy, reading a very unpleasant letter that he had written. But since there was already enough of that in the film, I didn't think it was necessary.
Did you agree? Yeah. Did you? Were you?
Oui, oui, oui. Oui. C'est mieux. On parle d'un homme, mais il n'est jamais là. C'est le problème.
And did you participate at all while Fred was editing or not?
No.
No, I edited the film in Maine.
Oh, so okay.
Not because Natalie was in Paris, but because I was in Maine.
So that was only yours.
For good or bad.
Any other question? Okay, I think we're good here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for the film, most of all. Buongiorno, benvenuti alla conferenza stampa del nostro film in concorso Bones and All. Prima di cominciare vi presento gli ospiti al tavolo partendo dalla destra in fondo. Allora, il produttore Lorenzo Mieli, la produttrice Teresa Park, l'attore Mike Rylance, l'attrice Taylor Russell, il regista del film Luca Guadagnino, il coprotagonista Timothée Chalamet, coprotagonista Chloe Sevigny, il produttore e sceneggiatore Dave Kaganik e il distributore Massimiliano Orfei, Division Distribution. I start with one question and then I open. Luca, your first American film. Why this? Why there?
I really ruminate. Scusate, parlo in italiano? Ok, ho ragionato molto a lungo nella mia vita, da quando ero ragazzino che sognava di fare cinema, sul paesaggio americano, sull'immaginario del cinema americano da cui sono stato profondamente influenzato e formato. E credo che forse in maniera inconsapevole ho cercato sempre di rinviare il momento, forse perché la vastità e la complessità degli Stati Uniti d'America meritavano la prospettiva di una persona un po' più matura. E l'occasione si è manifestata in maniera imprevista e familiare quando Dave, che ha scritto questo straordinario copione, me l'ha fatto leggere, un copione che lui a cui stava lavorando al di là di me, ma che per appunto le vie bellissime dell'amicizia è diventato un altro dei nostri modi per parlarci, visto che io e Dave siamo amici molto intimi e insieme abbiamo fatto molte cose e molte altre ne faremo. E quando ho letto la sceneggiatura era inevitabile per me vedere nella storia di questi drifters e di queste identità in cerca di una forma di possibilità nell'impossibile qualcosa che mi attraeva profondamente. E quindi in maniera molto naturale, diciamo, tutto questo si è compiuto.
Hi, Scott with Cinema Magazine. This is for Taylor and Timothy. Watching the movie, I thought, wow, it's a really interesting examination of community. How do we find the people that are like us? And that sometimes, whether it's through religion or politics, sexuality, or in this case, eating flesh, who is our tribe? Where do we find them? And who understands us? And I was wondering if the two of you could talk about when did you find your tribes? When did you find the people that understood you?
Oh, boy. Sorry. Thanks. For me, I think I'm still finding them. I have a few very special people in my life who I rely on a great deal. But that's the beauty of, being able to keep living on Earth, is that you find more and more people that you feel, a deep sacred connection with. And yeah, I'm excited to meet the people that are going to come in, for me at least. But I have some good ones right now.
I'd say for me, my tribe was, growing up in New York, was theater people, and realizing that those were my people, seeing Mark Rylance on Broadway in Jerusalem when I was around 12, 13 years old, Denzel Washington and Raising in the Sun. I lost my grandmother this year, and I realized as she was passing, and my mom and I were talking about Kiss Me Kate, a musical that she had been in when she was young. As someone that sort of struggled, as you just said, who my tribe was, where I came from, with parents from very different backgrounds, I realized as my grandmother was passing that without sound, that were show people and that were theater people and actors, and I felt at home in that moment. This movie, this script that we developed with Luca and Dave, that was made at the height of the pandemic, and I think a big part of it was a tribelessness, was being cut off from the social contact that helps us understand where we are in the world. That so many of us, probably a lot of us in this room, were understanding where we were based on the story we were telling ourselves as opposed to social contact and what usually gets us by. And I saw this story about Marin and Lee, primarily Marin, because this is Taylor's movie and she does a beautiful job carrying it. Are intensely isolated young people without identity really yet, that find affirmation through the mirror of love, through the mirror of each other's gaze. I think, without giving anything away from Marin's character, well, I can't speak for Marin, but I think for Lee, that affirmation is strong at first, and I think as many people have had their experience in love too, that affirmation can quickly lead you to the same, I don't know, like hauntedness and hopelessness.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Congratulations. It's Stephen Schaefer for the Boston Herald. Timothée, I wonder, what was it about this role that made you feel it was irresistible, that you had to play it? Was something to do with maybe a contrast with Saving the World and Dune, to take something like this on?
Yeah, you know, perhaps some of that story is about someone who's on a prophecy, who's on a path that can't get off it, and it's beyond him. And I was dying to work with Luca again and tell a story that was grounded like the first story we told together, but this time in the American Midwest in the 80s, about people that are disenfranchised in every way possible, existentially disenfranchised. When he said that Chloe Sevigny, Mark Rylance, Taylor Russell, Taylor who I had seen in Waves, who we had circled a couple projects together that didn't happen in the States, and this one came together very quickly, and that Luca, unlike any experience I've had in a movie, was welcoming my input in a script sense, and that Lee could be taken from an alpha jock more to a broken soul. That felt very attractive. And I can't overstate, you know, like I said, Taylor and Waves, but growing up watching Chloe, seeing Mark on stage multiple times in New York, excellent to work with Michael Stuhlbarg again, Andre Holland, who's excellent in this film. This is like a cast of artists and actors that you dream of working with.
Signora qua. In prima fila. Va bene.
Buongiorno, sono Alessandra De Tommasi di Leggo. My question is to Mr. Chalamet. I would like to ask you something related to about what you just said about love. There is a sentence in the movie that said that love is actually what saves us and make us free, set us free. I was wondering, when do you feel free, and if you agree with the sentence of the movie, because to me it was very poetic. Thank you.
Man, it's a beautiful question, and a very personal one, but a beautiful one. I don't know, I think, well, certainly from the lens of familial love and friendship love, yeah, I got friends and wonderful relationships here. I feel like between Luca and my new friendship with Taylor, you know, I feel that love strongly too. And then for the other kinds, you know, I'm still very young, and I want to graduate from Lee and Marin's love, that's a love of just affirming that you're worthy of being loved, to hopefully something greater.
There's a question here.
Buongiorno, Giulia Bianconi del Tempo. Volevo chiedere a Guadagnino, visto che questo è un film che parla di identità, arrivato al 7° film, chi è Luca Guadagnino e che cosa cerca nel suo cinema? E a Chalamet è un film che parla di emarginazione, di solitudine. Se anche a questo punto della tua vita piena di successo ti capita di sentirti solo e emarginato in qualche modo. Grazie.
È una domanda difficile a cui rispondere, quindi non so se posso rispondere, perché veramente se sapessi chi sono sarei forse anche annoiato da me stesso. La mia ambizione cinematografica è quella, da un lato, di poter avere il controllo del lavoro che faccio, il controllo sul meccanismo della messa in opera del mio lavoro, e contemporaneamente abbandonarmi al piacere assoluto di lavorare con amici, persone che fanno parte della mia famiglia ormai da tanti anni e che contribuiscono in maniera profonda con la loro straordinaria creatività a creare quello che è il risultato di un lavoro profondamente collettivo. E quindi devo dire che, mi sento di essere soddisfatto perché ho il privilegio di avere questo tipo di pratica del mio mestiere.
You know, definitely wouldn't use the word marginalized, because the gift of getting to work with Luca again, the gift that he gave me of a career, again, to be up here with Chloe and Andre, and well, not Andre here, but Chloe and Mark and Taylor, that's a great gift, so I wouldn't say marginalized. I think the isolation these characters feel in the movie came less from success in my personal life and more what everyone in this room is experiencing in the pandemic and how intensely socially isolated we were. Not that we're attention-hungry, narcissistic beings, but nonetheless, you need that contact to understand where you are. And I felt a similar disillusionment that I think Lee was feeling in the script at that point.
Hi, Kyle Buchanan from the New York Times. Timothy and Luca, can you talk about your reunion with Michael Stuhlbarg in this movie? And Luca, can you talk about casting David Gordon Green in that scene?
Well, it was a delight, the idea that we could summon Michael to be the perverted father after having been the loving father in Call Me By Your Name. And of course, acting is playing, and playing is like really having fun, and that was a great fun. David is a very dear friend of mine. I had the great privilege of becoming a friend of David, thank you to Giulia Danielo Vallan, who, when she was the director of the Torino Film Festival, invited me in the jury, and in the same jury there was David, and we became friends. And I even tried to make him do Suspiria as a director, me as a producer, and it didn't work out, but we kept being friends, and I read the script. I remember I told you, David, immediately, like one of the two guys in the fire. I saw David Gordon Green. I asked him if he were game for it. I said sure, and he came and he did it. We also have a moment in which the two characters play guitar and they sing songs. Maybe one day we will release that sequence. It's beautiful. You wrote the song. It's fantastic.
I'd like to follow up on the theme of isolation. This film was shot in the Middle America. It's a place where a lot of European audiences and international don't have access. They don't necessarily go. It's not a destination. And what it meant for you to be there for the time of the shooting, and how that reality affected the film, if in any way.
I'm talking strictly from the perspective of how we made the movie, which was a road movie. We made base camp in Cincinnati, but we moved a lot. And it was our mandate, my mandate and our task, to make sure that we were not going to give up the idea of portraying reality of this movie. And it is a testament of the wonderful production designer of this movie, Elliot Hostetter, who managed to create a world without creating it, seemingly. It's beautiful the way he really was able to find this America within America, not on a sound stage.
And how meaningful was for the cast to be able to shoot there rather than a sound stage? Maybe Mark, you can start.
Yeah, it's very helpful to be in real places. Yeah. But the sound stage is okay too.
We actually shot on a soundstage for like a day or two. Remember that? Right?
The murder scene at the end. Yeah, but the Midwest is a very surprising place. Very evocative, isn't it, of all kinds of things.
There was a question there. Yeah, Louis.
Thomas Cardinali per Cusano Media Group. La mia domanda è per Luca. Ti volevo chiedere, il film, uno dei messaggi diciamo più belli è che anche le persone che hanno una maggiore oscurità alla fine riescono comunque a trovare un raggio di luce, un raggio di sole. Ecco, a te è mai capitato di avere questa oscurità, magari anche agli altri protagonisti, e qual è il vostro raggio di luce che vi porta a rivedere le cose sotto un altro punto di vista? Grazie.
Sicuramente è il piacere di fare le cose, la messa in scena è un piacere, un raggio di luce per me. È il privilegio di lavorare con amici che sono anche artisti straordinari come quelli qui a questo tavolo. In generale non credo di essere una persona oscura perché sono del segno del leone, sono nato ad agosto, quindi sono abbastanza solare.
There. La signora là. You?
Hi. This is for Ms. Russell and Mr. Chalamet. I thought this is about isolation from choices. And I think when kids in high school or middle school make their choices, they're judged for it very much. And these characters are being judged for their things they can't really control. So I was wondering if you could make a commentary on if you've ever felt judged or, by your choices, or just a comment on it. Thank you.
Well, I was had the honor of interviewing Taylor yesterday for a magazine that she was doing, and she's into holistic wellness, and I asked her if she could make any magic potion. If she was the Willy Wonka of magic potions, what she would make. And she said that she would make a potion that you take every morning, and that it would remove your ability to cast judgment on people and to be judged, right? And I think true to that sentiment, to be young now, to be young whenever. I can only speak for my generation, but it is to be intensely judged. I can't imagine what it is to grow up with the onslaught of social media, and it was a relief to play characters that are wrestling with an internal dilemma, absent the ability to go on Reddit or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok and figure out where they fit in, which is without casting judgment on that, because if you can find your tribe there, then all the power. But I think it's tough to be alive now. I think societal collapse is in the air. It smells like it. And without being pretentious, that's why hopefully these movies matter, because that's the role of the artist, or so I'm told, is to shine a light on what's going on.
Taylor, would you like to add something to? I'm here. Would you like to add something to it?
I think Timothy said it very beautifully. But yeah, I mean, I have a little brother who's 19, 20-ish, and thinking about him in this world, and the, self-judgment and the judgment of others, and that opinions seem so flooded in your everyday in such a drastic and severe way. It's so scary. Because the hope is really that you can find your own sort of compass within all of it. And that seems like it's a difficult task now, and is, I don't know the future of that, but yeah, it's something that's on my mind a lot.
Prima fila qua.
Ben Dalton from Screen International. Congratulations, I thought the film was extraordinary. Timothy, you have a credit as a producer on this. Can you tell us a bit about how that came about, how you found that experience, and is it something you're looking to do more of?
Well, I can just thank Luca again. Luca, who's fatherly with me and guiding me in that process for the first time. I think the biggest reason I could even claim that is the work that David and Luca and I did before the movie started, and how much we worked on the script with Kemi's blessing, the author of the book, who's sitting right here, so thank you for that. And it was a wonderful experience. I can't say that I was, helping organize schedules or anything like that. But it's something I hope to continue doing, and hopefully even be able to make things that I'm not in that help, bring voices and faces to screen that historically don't get the opportunity so much.
We have time for one more, right there.
Thank you. Mazzetto Messa for Nocturno Cinema. I have a question for the director. So you work very hard on the soundtrack. We have the tenses, the moments, and also the kiss music. How do you choose these musics? How do you work on the soundtrack?
The soundtrack has different layers. This soundtrack, it's my first collaboration with the Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, these masterful composers and Nine Inch Nails legends. And when I approached them, the discussion was all about finding somehow the sound of a road trip and the sound of the American landscape, and we focus very much on the guitar and also on the individual notes, this idea, this concept that the individual can make it in America. So these notes in a way resonate to that, this like guitar note. And also I told them, you should go very romantic. Then we found cues of music in the movie. The kiss, there was something about the kiss. Maybe Dave has context about the kiss, so I let you talk about it. But in the meantime, we also wanted to put a sort of like parallel between Lee kind of being so completely off the center and the music that in that period I could have considered more off the center, like the Joy Division, the New Order. But
for me, this choice of songs in the script just came from finding a box of cassette tapes, having been a teenager in '88, and picking what I thought were the the ones that made me either smile or cry. I just put to the script.
And I'm so sorry, but this is all our time off. They came twice already to call. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Buongiorno a tutti e benvenuti alla conferenza stampa di ATHENA. Vi presento subito gli ospiti al nostro tavolo, che sono il produttore Murad Belkedar, gli attori Ouassini Mbarek, Anthony Bayon, Sami Sliman, Dali Ben Salah e il regista Roman Gavras. Vi ricordo che il film sarà disponibile su Netflix dal 23 settembre. Prima di cominciare, Roman voleva forse dire qualcosa. You want to say something before starting? Sì.
So I know you guys mostly saw the film recently, which is a very complex film to digest straight away in the morning. And coming here because it's a strong film, it's not easy to digest. So I hope we're here to answer questions. And Ouassini and I chose to wear a pastel shirt to ease your eyes after what you saw just now.
Yes, that's true.
Prima di darvi la parola vorrei cominciare con una domanda proprio per Roman. Vorrei chiedergli di raccontarci proprio la genesi di questo progetto. Abbiamo letto fortemente ispirato naturalmente alla tragedia greca che si intreccia inevitabilmente con fatti di cronaca. Come avete lavorato su questo concetto, come avete sviluppato il progetto a partire dalla prima scintilla?
So we started writing this project with Lajli, which we're friends since we're 15 years old, but we always worked together. When he was doing a film or a documentary, I was helping. When I was doing a film or a music video, he was helping. And about 2 years ago, we had the idea of starting this project, where the writing started from a very simple point, which was the idea of doing this modern tragedy, which is an intimate tragedy that starts with a brotherhood getting split apart, and their anger and sadness and grief spills over the neighborhood and the fire spills over the nation. And so we wanted to tell this intimate story that could inflame the nation, basically.
Il film è anche e soprattutto una esperienza molto immersiva, molto coinvolgente e l'utilizzo di riprese molto lunghe, di lunghi piani sequenza, come dire, introduce lo spettatore in un mondo sin dal primo momento. Ecco, anche nella messa in scena, quali sono stati i punti fermi delle vostre scelte, della sua scelta stilistica, quindi questi piani sequenza molto lunghi e anche la coreografia di movimenti di massa, come ha lavorato sulla messa in scena?
Donc une fois qu'on a commencé à sorry, I'll do it in English. Once we started to have this idea of the tragedy, we wanted to have a strong iconography about how to articulate this tragedy and to be immersed in what is happening was completely key to the story, to have the audience going through a lot of sensations and going through a lot of feelings as the characters progress. So the characters are living something in real time, and we wanted to have that sentiment of real time for the audience to live it with them without having the time of thinking or having any like feedback from what's happening. So the audience is living in real time as the characters are living in real time. So for that, the one-ers were really important for us because you get that aspect of living a situation as it unfolds, and the tragedy start with sun up and finishes with sundown. So you get the unity of time as well.
Ci sono delle domande intanto? Allora, apriamo alla platea lì.
En français,
J'ai beaucoup, Alexandria Sage, AFP. J'ai beaucoup apprécié le fait qu'il n'y a pas de vilains ni des héros dans le film. Et toutes les actions, toutes les réactions, même si tu n'es pas exactement d'accord, ils sont compréhensibles. Alors, j'aimerais bien si vous pouvez parler de ça. Et aussi, ça pose la question si chaque côté n'a pas tout à fait tort. Ça veut dire quoi? C'est quoi la solution? Et c'est une question posée dans la télévision pendant une scène.
Merci. Alors, la solution, je pense que c'est pas aux artistes de la donner. La solution, je l'ai pas. Par contre, c'est vrai que quand on explore une tragédie comme ça, l'idée, c'est de pas avoir des gentils, des méchants d'un côté. Les situations sont toujours plus complexes que ça. Et je pense que les acteurs ont incarné, parce que le film n'est pas très bavard, on est plus dans l'action et dans la frénésie du moment. Et les acteurs ont réussi à incarner cette complexité de il n'y a pas de gentils, il n'y a pas de méchants, tout ça est plus compliqué, le destin est ce qui dirige tout dans cette action. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a un mal fait au début du film, et à partir de ce mal fait, c'est le destin qui vient tout ravager. Donc sur la question du bien et du mal, c'est jamais très clair, et c'est pour ça que si le film pouvait se résumer en une phrase ou en un tweet, ce serait pas intéressant. Je pense que c'est pour ça que les personnages, c'est intéressant d'explorer des personnages qui ont multiples facettes, qui ont du bien en eux, du mal en eux, et qui avancent dans ce film.
Hello, my name is Petra Erdmann from the Austrian Broadcasting Corporation. I would ask you in English, talking about tragedy and like the apocalyptic scenery in your film. It's a wonderful film, I liked it very much. So could you talk about the music and the film score, how music and the film score was important to create this tragedy? And as a music video director as well, so how would you see the difference between soundtrack, choosing songs for your film, than composing or having someone compose a score for your film?
So the film it's a score. The whole film is a score done by my friend Sirkin, and we were inspired by the music of our friend who passed away, DJ Mehdi, 10 years ago. And basically what we did is we reorchestrated in like a more symphonic and with a lot of choirs. There's a lot of Greek choirs where we wrote some Greek lyrics with Greek choirs, because in the tragedy it's like the coryphees that come and sing and narrate the story. And it was important to have that kind of timeless feeling to the film through the music, through some of the iconography as well, because some of those conflicts are timeless. They started from the Trojan War to maybe in 100 years in a conflict in the moon with Elon Musk, who knows? You know, so it was the idea of printing the idea of timelessness of the conflict.
Io ho una domanda riprendo un attimo la parola, ho una domanda per Dali. Vorrei sapere intanto, ecco, le sue impressioni quando ha letto la sceneggiatura. Il suo personaggio è forse quello che cambia di più nell'arco della narrazione, e come si è preparato a questo ruolo e che tipo di riflessioni ha fatto su questo personaggio.
Comment dire, le scénario à la base est très complexe, il y a énormément de clés sur le personnage, c'est ce qui m'a séduit, et comme disait Romain tout à l'heure, c'est pas un film de genre qui imposerait du manichéen, ce sont des humains complets et donc complexes, avec une trajectoire plus forte qu'eux, dans une tragédie surpuissante, quelque chose de la tragédie grecque. Et donc c'est tout de suite très inspirant et très jouissif pour un comédien, un acteur, de pouvoir se plonger dans ce genre de rôle, avec toute cette épaisseur et, comme je le disais, cette trajectoire intéressante et inattendue.
Prego.
Bonjour, Pepa Blanes, Cadena Ser Radio Spain. Le film dit que c'est l'extrême droit, les grands mal de la société. Et ma question est, est-ce qu'on peut éviter d'arriver à ces guerres civiles que montre le film? Il y a possibilité d'éviter ça?
Alors, bon, c'est compliqué de parler de la fin pour pas spoiler le film. Je ne pense pas que le film se réduit à ça. Je pense que sur la question de comment éviter, encore une fois, moi je fabrique des images, j'ai pas de solution, je suis pas un homme politique, mais par contre, sur la question de... c'était quoi le début de la question, pardon?
Si est-ce qu'on peut éviter d'arriver à ces situations de guerre civile dans un même pays?
C'est une question très compliquée à répondre. Évidemment, l'idée, par contre, c'est que il y a toujours des forces, il y a toujours des forces qui sont pas forcément visibles et qui poussent les gens à la guerre. On a vu ça depuis Colin Powell qui a montré sa fiole avec du thé à la menthe dedans et ça nous a emmenés tous à la guerre en Irak. Je pense qu'il y a toujours dans toutes les guerres des forces dans l'ombre qui poussent et au final, le film montre le résultat de ces situations-là, ce qui se passe sur le terrain. Et il y a ce côté de démonstration à partir d'un moment où le mal a été fait, l'enchaînement des événements qui va venir intervenir pour amener, pousser à la guerre, vont être les éléments visibles qu'on voit sur le film, mais il y a toujours des forces, quelles qu'elles soient, qui poussent à ça.
Sì, arriviamo. Per Sami invece è stata la prima esperienza cinematografica, se non sbaglio, quindi vorrei chiedergli come ha costruito il personaggio insieme agli sceneggiatori, insieme al regista e che esperienza è stata.
Bonjour tout le monde. Déjà, c'est bien effectivement mon premier rôle, mon tout premier rôle dans quelconque film et quelconque œuvre. Du coup, ça a été quand même assez gros et j'ai eu la chance d'être très 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 bien entouré. On m'a préparé pour ce rôle dans l'école Courtrage-May avec un coach qui s'appelait Sébastien, qui a fait son travail comme il le devait. J'ai même été encore entouré derrière par le directeur de casting Mohamed Bellamar qui m'a encore bien aidé. Derrière, Romain il m'a jamais lâché. Mes deux grands frères qui sont après, enfin les deux rôles qui jouent, mes grands frères dans le film sont à mes côtés encore aujourd'hui pour me conseiller à quelconque problème que je pourrais rencontrer. Donc, ce que je pourrais rajouter de plus sur ça, je ne saurais pas vraiment. Merci, un grand merci à tout le monde déjà. À part ça.
Merci. Lì, grazie.
Bonjour, je voulais questionner le regard politique dans le film, le rapport à la réalité. Est-ce que quand vous faites ce film-là, vous pensez plus à une alerte, à une idéalisation peut-être aussi de la révolte, qui est un sujet qui revient assez souvent, enfin qui était présent dans pas mal de vos films. Et pour les acteurs, quelle vérité vous avez vue dans ce film?
Je pense que toute œuvre, en tout cas, quand on a commencé à construire le film, on se base sur des éléments de réalité, on se base sur... Et la tentative et l'ambition du film, c'était, comme dans la tragédie, d'être au-dessus de la réalité, de créer d'une iconographie, encore une fois, atemporelle, c'est-à-dire que les CRS vont jamais se mettre en torture romaine. On a monté des créneaux de château fort sur la cité pour justement, par la musique, par l'iconographie, ramener ce côté atemporel et ce côté au-dessus de la réalité. Maintenant, pour répondre à votre question sur l'idéalisation, je pense qu'il y a deux réponses à ça. Je pense que le cinéma, de toute façon, héroïse les personnages. Et je pense que dans cette histoire en particulier, au début, il faut héroïser le personnage de Sami. Il faut qu'il soit un chef de guerre, il faut qu'on comprenne pourquoi tous ces jeunes vont le suivre. Sauf que petit à petit, il va se déliter. Quand on en parlait dans le film pour avoir des références pop, on disait petit à petit, il devient Dark Vador. C'est-à-dire que le film commence sur une espèce d'excitation, mais comme toutes les révolutions, comme tous les débuts d'une action d'embrasement, il y a de l'excitation, il y a de l'héroïsation. Et petit à petit, il se délite pour à la fin finir tragiquement sans vouloir spoiler. Mais l'idée, c'est que il met un pied dans une violence qui, à un moment, est plus forte que lui et plus forte que tout le monde, pour finir vers l'embrasement général et le chaos.
La domanda era anche per gli attori sulla verità che avete trovato, no? Questi personaggi.
C'est pour vous.
C'est moi.
Ouais.
Quelle vérité
t'as trouvé avec
Quelle vérité? Il y a, je crois, dans ce film, plusieurs vérités. Dans les personnages. Ouais.
Bah, sur une des vérités que moi j'ai pu comprendre là-dessus, c'est que l'amour, c'est l'une des choses les plus puissantes sur cette terre. Et quand il y a quelque chose qui vient s'y opposer, on n'y réagit vraiment pas de la même manière. C'est vraiment propre à chacun et nos rôles le démontrent. C'est 3 directives différentes et une même famille qui se détruit. Donc moi, c'est le seul truc que j'ai pu en tirer comme vérité.
Ouais, c'est ça.
Ouais, face au deuil.
Face au deuil. Tout le monde a déjà perdu et tout le monde va continuer à perdre. C'est une vérité pour tout le monde.
Il n'y a pas de gagnant.
On va tous un jour perdre ce qu'on a de plus précieux, la vie. Et ce film nous donne l'occasion de réfléchir à ce qu'on doit faire de notre vie avant de devoir la perdre.
Et surtout, il n'y a pas d'unique vérité. Il faut dire qu'il y a 3 personnages, 3 destins, chacun a sa vérité face à ce deuil. Et on ne peut pas se permettre de juger un destin plus honorable que l'autre. On est dans une fable réaliste, certes, mais ça reste une fable. Et donc on prend ces personnages-là, sans jugement, sans parallèle à quoi que ce soit, et dans ce microcosme, on va dire chacun a sa vérité. Chacun sera touché plus ou moins, aura plus d'empathie par un personnage ou un autre, mais chacun a sa trajectoire, chacun a sa vérité, il n'y en a pas une plus forte que l'autre. Chacun a quelque chose d'honorable à défendre dans sa trajectoire. Même le personnage de Mokhtar de Wassini, il a sa vérité.
Anthony?
Du coup, nous, avec Romain, on a travaillé un peu en autarcie par rapport à comment se trouve ce personnage dans cette histoire. Il y avait vraiment l'idée qu'au-delà de tout ce qui est raconté, au-delà de tout le contexte qui est filmé par Romain, et à propos de ses 3 frères et de ses tragédies, il y avait vraiment l'idée, avec ce personnage, d'aller chercher quelque chose d'hyper fragile et d'humain, où le gars n'est clairement pas à sa place, et encore moins dans une histoire comme ça, encore moins dans un contexte comme ça, encore moins dans un décor comme ça. Donc il y a eu la recherche de vérité, elle a été faite à cet endroit-là. Vraiment l'idée que Jérôme n'est vraiment pas à sa place, donc plus à l'endroit de la fragilité, on a travaillé un peu comme ça, sans pour autant travailler que dans cette trajectoire-là, parce que ce serait trop facile. Et pour revenir à ce que disait Romain tout à l'heure, c'est pas tout noir ou tout blanc, c'est pas que binaire, mais du coup, on a surtout travaillé dans cette direction-là dans un premier temps.
C'è una domanda lì? Sì, sì, arriviamo.
Buongiorno, innanzitutto complimenti per il film, l'ho adorato. La mia domanda è per gli attori. C'è un momento, un gesto o una scelta che vi ha fatto sentire vicino al vostro personaggio? Grazie.
Oui, beaucoup. Il y a quelques moments clés dans chacun des personnages. Il y a surtout la fraternité, puisque j'ai moi-même un petit frère. C'est pas quelque chose d'exceptionnel, mais c'est là que j'ai trouvé que les rapports qu'il y avait entre nos différents personnages pouvaient être ce qui me ressemble le plus, dans une manière différente, mais en pouvant faire une parallèle.
Je sais pas, j'ai pas bien... La question, je ne l'ai pas bien comprise.
C'est ce que tu as tiré des trucs en toi pour ton personnage?
Oui et non, parce que j'ai eu besoin de créer quelque chose, donc c'est sûr que j'y ai mis un peu de ma part, mais Karim n'est pas Samy. Donc c'est compliqué de répondre à ça, mais Non, j'ai eu des liens avec du coup Dali et Wassini qui dans le film jouent le rôle de grand frère, et dû à certaines scènes, on a eu certains liens qui se sont vraiment consolidés d'une manière que je n'aurais pas prévue. Mais ouais, c'est quelque chose d'assez court, parce qu'un tournage, malgré que ça soit, quand on le fait c'est long, c'est très court, et on peut se trouver des affinités avec certaines personnes dues à certaines choses qu'on fait. Et comme je l'ai dit au début, encore aujourd'hui, pour moi, dans ma tête, j'ai de nouveaux grands frères. Donc, voilà.
Incarner le personnage, c'est une chose, mais le comprendre, c'en est une autre. Le comprendre, ça a été pour ma part assez, pas simple, mais rapide. Il y a beaucoup de ponts entre la fiction, donc le trajet de ce personnage et ses valeurs, et ce que je suis ou ce que je pense être dans la vie. Donc j'ai pu calquer, ou du moins comprendre très vite, les enjeux ou ce qui poussait ce personnage à toujours avancer. Après, il subit des choses quasiment inimaginables pour soi dans la vie, mais il y a énormément de ponts et de points communs, donc c'est pas un rôle très éloigné. Il y a énormément de travail, bien sûr, mais ça se comprend, je le comprends. Après.
Anthony?
Pour ma part, je vais rejoindre un peu Dali sur le fait d'aller comprendre le personnage plus que de trouver des points communs avec lui réels. De manière très pragmatique, il fallait une porte d'entrée vers ce personnage. Et moi-même, sans spoiler le film, mais il y a à un moment donné une proximité avec un personnage, et moi j'ai été puisé un peu vers ce sentiment universel qu'est la compassion et l'empathie, la bienveillance et l'humanité, pour me rapprocher du coup du personnage de Dali. Et ça m'a aidé vraiment Enfin, en tout cas, c'est un point commun que j'ai avec ce personnage, l'empathie, et le moment où du coup il nous reste plus grand-chose et on se regarde avec la personne pour qui il reste plus grand-chose non plus, on se comprend et d'un coup il y a peut-être une porte qui s'ouvre. Voilà.
Allora, prima di ridare la parola a Lee, vorrei però al signore con la giacca blu e poi rossa, vorrei coinvolgere nella conversazione anche il produttore Murad Belkadar, chiedendogli quali sono state le sfide produttive di questo film.
Bonjour à tous. Les défis de la production ont été de trouver un décor en plein été disponible et qui pouvait créer le moins de nuisances pour ses habitants. Et on a eu la chance exceptionnelle d'être accueillis par la ville d'Evry et ses habitants. Et je dois dire, c'est l'expérience qu'on a tous vécue. Le climat du tournage a été extraordinairement doux. Voilà, et tout le monde était engagé de manière passionnée, donc c'était une très belle expérience. Et ensuite, la fabrication pure du film. On a eu de la chance d'être accompagné par une équipe technique exceptionnelle, puis Romain qui est un grand capitaine. Donc franchement, hormis le stress du Covid, la fabrication a été une très belle aventure.
Prego. Chi ha il microfono? Sì, prego.
Buongiorno, sono Adriano Da Grandis del Gazzettino. Volevo tornare sul significato politico del suo film, sull'ultima scena. È vero la storia che avevamo detto prima, che non ci sono cattivi e buoni, ma mi pare che l'ultima scena indichi chiaramente che la responsabilità maggiore degli incidenti sia dell'estrema destra. Volevo chiederle quindi se alla luce del seguito che l'estrema destra sta avendo in Europa, sia questa la grande stabilità anche alla luce del grande successo della Le Pen in Francia e del probabile successo di Fratelli d'Italia in Italia alle prossime elezioni. Grazie.
Encore une fois, c'est compliqué de parler de la fin parce que faut que j'invite les gens à voir le film. J'ambitionne de ne pas faire des films à message, mais plus pour créer des émotions et créer des sensations. il y a effectivement une montée de l'extrême droite partout en Europe, on le sent. L'ambition du film, en tout cas, elle est de montrer qu'il y a toujours, tapis dans l'ombre, des gens qui vont pousser à la guerre. Alors oui, aujourd'hui, l'extrême le plus flippant qu'on sent tous monter, c'est l'extrême droite. Je veux dire, c'est pas un sujet, que ce soit en France, en Italie, en Grèce, aux États-Unis. Et les moyens pour arriver à leur fin seront toujours détournés. Ce sera jamais frontal. Ce sera voilà. Donc, mais par contre, encore une fois, c'est vraiment c'est compliqué d'avoir un message de ceci est bien, ceci est pas bien. C'est un film qui est là pour emmener le spectateur au travers d'une aventure de sensations. Mais les sensations, ça ne veut pas dire qu'elle ne veut rien dire, ou l'iconographie ne veut pas dire qu'il n'y a pas quelque chose derrière. Mais par contre, le résumé en un message, c'est mauvais ou c'est bien, je ne pense pas que le film s'arrête là.
Hello, this is Yanis from Greece. Congratulations for a very powerful movie. And I have the obvious question to ask Romain. The title of the movie is Athena. Athena was a goddess in the ancient times, and Athens is the capital of Greece, and it's also the place in which, ironically, democracy was born. Therefore, I would like to ask you why Athena as the title of the film. Thank you.
For many reasons. I think one of the main protagonists of the film is the neighborhood, so it was important for me to qualify it. And Athena is the goddess of war and wisdom, and also, again, because we constructed it as a tragedy, as a Greek tragedy, but not specifically about one, like just taking elements from the construction, the narrative construction of the tragedy, it was important to stamp it with the title. And I like it when there's 2 A's in a title.
Dobbiamo fermarci qui. Grazie al regista, a tutto il cast.
Grazie.
Grazie a tutti.